So I think, Kevin, we have a few people on the line now. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and start with the poem.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Wesequate. In my language, I would say Tanse, Kevin Wesequate, Nika Son, Payapat, Neheopat, Ochimia. That means, hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Wesequate. I am from Payapat First Nation. I'm happy to meet everybody. I am a spoken word artist living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I was born in Saskatchewan. I've built my career as an artist here in Saskatchewan. I'm a visual artist and a poet and a spoken word artist. I brought several of my pieces that I've been working on, whether they're visual art and also, my paintings, which are right now, they're as prints. I don't know if anyone can see that, but I do have several prints available. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the spoken word poem, just to kind of get everybody, thinking about spoken word poetry and how it works and stuff. Now, a lot of it is your own writing, and a lot of it is performance. So there is some memorization in that's kind of called upon in these pieces, and I'll talk more about that as we go through this workshop. The first poem that I'm going to share with you is called Humility. Humility is one of those 7 grandfather teachings that they talk about. Humility is a lesson I learned right from the very start. You see, I like teaching art to kids because kids don't judge you and they have their whole future ahead of them and they'll love you unconditionally. And to me, that's just so beautiful. I love working with little kids so much that I heard that 2 of them were hungry and hadn't eaten for a couple of days. So I took it upon myself to paint my face like a clown, and I grabbed the snare drum, and I started from the downtown Vimy Memorial in downtown Saskatoon, and I marched all day up to the core and back and forth all day long, beating to no particular beat, trying to raise some money just so some kids could eat. Now, at one point, I wish someone would have done that for me. You see, I learned about humility right from the very start. I was diagnosed as a dyslexic learner. That means that everything I had tried to read and write was backwards. You see, I even remember trying to write my first Dear Santa Claus letter, and I think it went something like this. Dear Satan, all I want for Christmas is a real evil God, because a real live dog probably would have made my childhood so much better. People always seem to look at me funny. I guess that's why I kept my head down and I focused on my artwork. You see, I missed out on a lot of social interactions during my elementary years, like recess time, lunchtime, or after school. You see, I was a special education student. I had to read and write everything 3 times in a row before I could get it. I had to read and write everything 3 times in a row before I could get it. I had to read and write everything 3 times in a row before I could get it. And you see, as a kid, I wish I didn't have some of these memories, and some of them aren't so fond to me. Like the first time I did a break and enter. You see, I was just a kid of about 7 years old, and while my friends were focused on the gold and the wealth amongst the shelves, I was focused upon the food and the fridge and the cabinets. I was doing my best just to feed myself. I was doing my best just to be my own Robin Hood. You see, I was never up to no good. You see, some of these memories I wish I didn't have. And you see, I went to a small high school near downtown Saskatoon so I could get the attention that I deserved. You see, I hung out in the libraries, or I hung out on the stairwells alone and lonely, until one day I started playing basketball at intramural at lunch hour, just to take me off of those lonely stairwells and my nose buried in poetry. And I wore hand-me-down clothing until I knew I could work for myself. And then I became the master of my own destiny. Unfortunately, I couldn't dictate who stayed alive or who stayed next to me. And most days, I'm just wishing I had a mom who was at home missing me. You see, I worked 2 jobs all the way up into university. One was in construction, and one at university was working as a student research assistant in a molecular genetics laboratory. Until one day, poetry found me. Now you see, I find myself surrounded by many friends, and I continue to make new friends all the time. And I find myself the founder and creator of the Indigenous Poets Society. And I've been celebrated for my works more times than I could keep track of, and I think I may continue to do so, because I've always done regardless of what people think of me. This is my humility. Thank you. So that's one of the poems that I've written along the way, and you can see that it's very performative based, and there's a lot of memorization in hand. So while I was reciting that piece to our participants, this is just a message. I hope that everyone has a pen and paper in hand. And if you all do, that's great. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times when we go to these spoken word events, whether they're poetry slams, community stages, open mics, whatever you want to call them, I always tend to try to have a pen and paper in hand. That way, I think that whatever inspiration you're drawing from an event or from whenever you're listening to stuff, you might want to take those notes down. So all through the talk right now, I would like you to start taking your notes. In fact, I would like to actually go ahead and get started on our writing assignment, so we could have some time to read some stuff near the end of the day. It's already 2:15, so we have roughly about 45 minutes left. And I want to make the best use of our time. So how many writers do we have out there right now? I was told we could have about between 6 and 10. Is that correct?
So right now, yeah, we have Zania, who's joining from California. Then we have a group that's joining from Brazil. I'm not sure how many students are there. Then we have Victor. And I think one person is just having audio troubles. Lumera, she's joining from Texas. So we have around, I would say, 4 or 5.
Okay, that's great. That's great. We'll leave some time near the end of this session so they could share. I hope they're able to share near the end of the session. And between times, I'll leave some time to provide for some questions if someone is curious about what I do. So I'm the founder of the Indigenous Poets Society. Here in Saskatoon, we have 2 groups that do spoken word poetry and poetry stages. The first group is called Tinnitus Poetry, and I've been a part of that group for probably over 12 years now, by contributing on stage or volunteering my time to kind of help them with their stage. One thing that I've noticed was there's a lot of Indigenous folks coming through, and a lot of times they wouldn't come back, and the work would just phenomenal, just blow you away phenomenally good. And I'm like, come back, you can win these poetry slams. But they never came back, and I was always questioning that. So for a long time, I was the only Indigenous artist doing it. And not only that, I was a male Indigenous poet doing this kind of stuff. And good thing I have some family and friends that encourage me. There's every time I felt like giving up and just trying something else out, they'd be like, you're basically blazing a trail for all of these other artists that are going to come behind you. So I really thought about that, and I took it personally, because I thought that if I could deliver my content with the Indigenous content and cultural content that it had, I think that there's going to be a little bit more understanding for other Indigenous artists. So throughout the years, just in the past 2 years or 3 years, we've had enormous success with the Indigenous Poets Society, meaning that we have our own shows every month. We support and advocate for each other. We released a chapbook 2 years ago, and it sold like crazy. And I'm sure if I had more published, it'd probably still continue to sell. And every month we have different Indigenous artists coming through, published or spoken word artists, musician, comedian, whatever it is. We celebrate them on our stage, and then we have poetry slams and open mics. Today's assignment is going to be in regards to time. And I know everybody, and this is one message that I stress to everyone, is everybody has their own particular story. Everybody has their own background, but it's relevant because we recognize each other in each other's work, and we come together and we celebrate that, and we empower each other with our words. So what I want to do is help you try to identify yourself, because like with my poetry, I try to remind students that the best way to, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is my circle poem. The best way that you could reach out and connect with the world that is around you is by basically writing for yourself and then reaching outwards. Now, this is something that I've done with numerous classes, whether it's elementary, post-secondary, high school, or university, or just whatever organizations there are. I've even done this with master's classes. So you guys are getting the same thing that I give to everybody else, and I don't necessarily change it other than simplifying it a little bit, but you guys are getting like what it is. So I try to identify, like my background is Nehewak. Now that means the four parts being. That means that in every being within the Indigenous culture, we try to recognize the four directions, the four seasons, and the four, different elements that make, the earth and stuff like that. So we talk about the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual. So one way that I do this is, and if you guys can start writing on this, is try to recognize yourself in one of the directions, whether it's past, future, or present. Okay, if it's future, you're basically projecting a future for yourself, a life, a better future. You're asserting your future by writing it down, and to me, this is a very powerful tool. Also, you could talk about what's going on currently. Like you could be like, last week I was south, and south you could be like I was in maybe Mexico or even South America, or maybe south could be even across the street from wherever you are right now. You could talk about that in the past or the present. Now, when you do this sort of stuff, what you got to do is you got to write to each of these directions. You don't have to pick all of them. You could pick one, but you have to write to these directions. Locate a place, find a location, name it. Also, name what your memory is at that place. But at the same time, when you're doing that, like perhaps it involves somebody else. So what you want to do is not name them, because in spoken word poetry, it's kind of be like, you don't want to do any call outs on people on stage. So you want to be like, my brother, my sister, they, them, whatever pronouns you're comfortable with using. Try to be comfortable with whatever they are, right? And then use that within your work, right? So, but not necessarily name them like, I was with George or whatever. So you got to name them and talk about that, and just start with that. And you start from the center and you work out. Because when you start from the center, you're basically starting with yourself. So the first point of this is to make notes of these different locations. And every location will have a different memory, a different future, a different person, or whatever, different seasons even. So try to keep it in groups of 4. All right? So now I'm going to get into basically the nuts and bolts of the way this works. So in identifying the self, I want you to, everybody here, we're going to go by the number of 4, okay? So everybody that is writing right now, I want you to think about your time in your life when you were the ages 0 to 4. Now, you might not have any memory or recollection, but you do know perhaps where you were born. You do know perhaps who had a hand in raising you. You could write about these certain things. And I'm going to time this out, and I'm going to give you about 2 minutes per age. So I'm just guessing that the highest age in this group is going to be, I'm going to say 20. Maybe it's higher. Maybe there are people here that are 28. But what I'm going to do is, after you go over your age, that I'm like, as I time this out, what I want you to do is start projecting what you think your future is going to be like by years of 4. Okay, so it's going to go 0 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, 16 to 20. And you're going to have 2 minutes in between both of those. And at every 2-minute mark, I'm going to give you that new age. All right? Is everybody ready to begin?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm getting my timer ready. And I think we only got about 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right now. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start writing about the age 0 to 4. You have 2 minutes on this.
Okay, I'm going to ask them.
Yeah.
Grab some seat.
Start writing on the age 0 to 4.
They just give them a...
And then after we get through 0 to 4.
Hi, Kevin. Can you repeat the assignment again, or the steps again? We have some students asking. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, for sure. So if everybody has their pens and papers out.
Yeah.
And if everyone is ready to write this down. So when I started this writing assignment, I gave you the prompts of identifying the self. So this is essentially going to become an identity poem. Okay? So you're going to have, I'll start with 5. Okay? We're going to give you 2 minutes to write about different age groups. The first age group is 0 to 4. Now 2 minutes isn't a lot of time. So you could just if you're not comfortable with writing a full piece, just take those notes. What happened in between the ages of 0 and 4? So after 2 minutes is done, I'm going to say, 2 minutes is done. I'm going to say ages 4 to 8. So then you're going to have to start writing what happened when you were 4 to 8 years old. Okay? And then after you're done 4 to 8 years old, we're going to go 2 minutes one more time. And we're going to go ages 12 to 16. So what you're essentially doing is you're writing kind of like a mini biography of your life, right? So as you go through this, you could take the elements, of the 4 directions. You could take that. Or you could take, the mental, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the 4 seasons. Just try to keep in mind these elements of 4, right? Because we're going by every 4 years, right? Okay. The original way that I did this was by ages of I think it was every 3 years, but I think it's just going to take too long by doing it every 3 years. So we're going to go by ages of 4. All right. Is that clear, or
Is that clear, everybody, or do you want him to repeat again? A thumbs up? Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, so let's get
One
started
question.
then.
So I came a little late, so I didn't get to hear what you said at the beginning. So we are going. Our task is to make a little biography for every 4 years.
That's right.
Or that's how long is this biography supposed to be
How
long?
old is the oldest person in your participant group?
22, maybe?
Okay, so we'll go up
Okay.
to the age 24, so that's six different segments.
But each biography, how long should it be?
So in
As long as you want it to be. I'll give you
Okay.
exactly 2 minutes to write it.
Okay.
So
Okay?
we're writing
Yeah.
0 to 4 now.
Okay.
Yeah. The first one is ages 0 to 4, so infant until 4 years old. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm going to get started here because we're running short on time, and I think we should get started right now. So start writing between the ages of 0 to 4. And I got my timer set here for exactly 2 minutes. And then when the 2 minutes is up, I'm going to say switch to the next 2 minutes. And for those of you that could see this, this is kind of what a poem might end up looking like when it's finally drafted. I also like to write poetry. Like this is my first attempt with watercolor, so I'm working on these different watercolor pieces, and I write my poetry on my my paintings that I do. And usually it's about social justice issues and identity and history and culture. These are some of the pieces that I do. When I was a kid, I started drawing these like elaborate little mazes. And then I just like I just did this one a couple years ago, but you could see the detail that it took. So instead of when I was supposed to be doing my homework, I was sitting at my desk, scribbling on my desk, stuff like that, and discovered I was a little bit of an artist. This one isn't done yet, but there's going to end up being poetry on this particular piece. So I always try to, with my work, I always try to blend certain elements into different stuff that I do. All right. So next 2 minutes, I want you to write between ages 4 and 8. Now you're writing ages 4 and 8, please. Within the Indigenous culture, there's a lot of mention of 4. You know, even when we do our ceremonies and stuff here in Saskatchewan, when we, like, for example, if we pick what are called Oskapios, which are helpers, they don't like to pick in groups of like 3. They'll always go by 2. So if there's going to be like a huge gathering and they need helpers, they'll never pick like a odd number like 7 or 9 or something. They always go for the most even numbers. For the Escapios, meaning like me, I would be a helper to an elder. So they'd always be like 2, 4 people, 6 people, 8 people, you know, and it goes on. And it'll always be by groups of 2. I don't know, it's just one of the teachings that they do. Another thing that they do too is when they do like sweat lodge ceremonies, they'll always grab their rocks in groups of 2 or 4. They'll never grab like 7 or 9 or any odd numbers. They do their best to harmonize their work with nature and try to, you know, bring that understanding back to nature. And I think that if we return to Earth's teachings and stuff like that, I think that when we become more in tune with our surroundings, I think is the best way to do it. Okay, so now you should be starting on ages 12 to 16. No, I'm sorry, ages 8 to 12. Yeah, 8 to 12 years old. What had happened in your life between ages 8 to 12? This is another thing that I do with my art, is I do what we call star blanket designs. So a star blanket kind of like it's like a star that works out, but it's super nice to work with because you can be as creative with it as you want. Some of the fun stuff that I've done with the star blanket design is I had fun with this, and I did the movie Predator and Alien. So this is my Predator star painting. What's print, and then this is my Alien star painting. So it's just like having fun with it and creating different stuff. See how much time we have. Okay. There's about 30 seconds left, and then we'll move to ages 12 to 16. All right. Now we are in ages 12 to 16. This is one of the most important stories that I tell to people, and I'll touch base on it just before we're finished here today. But I also try to my best to encourage Indigenous storytelling. They call it like the oral storytelling tradition. And I try to encourage people to reflect on their cultural backgrounds in regards to storytelling. Whether they're creation type stories or stories that talk about different locations or different beliefs and practices and stuff like that. So I always like do my best to honor that. And I think if we get to the basics of storytelling, it's really good for us to understand how spoken word poetry works, and we could kind of combine the both if we could. The Indigenous Poets Society, we've combined the both as best as we possibly could. Okay, now we are in the ages of 16 to 20 years old. So your life in between the ages of 16 and 20 years old. So with our group, the Indigenous Poets Society, this year we started to include elders to our group. Elders meaning that they would come out and they would do traditional prayer ceremonies with us with sweetgrass or sage. And it just provides a more comfortable atmosphere for a lot of young readers to come out, because some of the work ends up being very culturally sensitive, and I think it's really important to understand what people's backgrounds are. Like the pan idea for Indigenous culture is we always honor with a smudge and a prayer, and to move forward in a good way, so that our words are properly heard and respected. And there's no negative intention or negative type of emotions, because a lot of spoken word is very triggering. Triggering meaning that it might cause you to have different emotions that are involved, whether those emotions make you feel really sad, make you very angry, or resentful even, poetry is a powerful tool to convey different messages and stuff like that. And I think that when we do this, we really have to respect the listener, respecting ourselves. So, and it also provides a safe environment in regards to, like if someone gets on stage, they're not reading offensive material and calling out different groups of people. Like we can't encourage that. We try to discourage it as best as we can, but we can't outright go and say, well, you can't do that. So now we're in the ages of 20 to 24. The ages of 20 to 24, and this is going to be our last one. For those of you that aren't 20 and 24, I want you to project the future for yourself and think about, okay, where am I going to be when I'm 24 years old? What do I want to be doing? What am I going to achieve? Okay. Yeah, so with the Indigenous Poets Society, we also don't give an age bracket for when people can't share. So with the regular spoken word scene, they usually do it in kind of like a pub or a bar. There's alcohol served, and it's for a fun environment. But at the same time, the Indigenous folks that come out to these readings don't feel like they should be reading their words in an atmosphere where people are drinking alcohol. So we've made it all ages and non-alcoholic type events just to give that added comfort, because a lot of the works that people share are the people that come out are sharing for the very first time, and that's like so difficult. Like I remember the first time I was sharing, I was so afraid. I was like shaking. My paper was like right in front of me, just like literally shaking. Like, I was just lucky that they had a microphone there so I could get my words through to everybody. Okay, we're just about done in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, that's it, everybody. That is one of the writing workshops that I do. How is everybody feeling right now? Is your hand should be feeling kind of sore if you were writing through that entire process. That's a long time to write a lot of notes. Do you feel that, that you could have went on with this? Like, were you inspired to keep on going with this? Or did you find at any point that new works could have been created from it? Anyone?
For me, it was kind of difficult to move on to the next age group. I had more ideas that I wish I could have gone back to.
It's really limiting, though, isn't it? Like 2 minutes per age group. So, like, the thing of it is that these pieces are just these are like the platform pieces of more pieces. Like you said that you could have kept writing for a different age group. You could go back to that and continue to write and edit that piece as best as you know how. Sometimes when we're going through these types of things, we're just basically skimming over the surface of a lot of other things that had happened throughout our lifetimes. So I think that it's a really good way of uncovering and unpacking the knapsack, if you will, and taking different ideas. And then also, not only that, your memory is bringing about different people that have been a part of your life. We come across so many different people in our lives, and we impact each other, differently. So I think these are also different things that we could write about with identity. So with that, I don't know, I know that this isn't a finished, polished piece, but is anybody comfortable with sharing their work right now?
No one?
Any volume?
I mean, I can go.
All
I
right.
was just waiting if somebody wanted to
Okay.
volunteer to. Alright, so I put from 0 to 4 on November 9th, 2000. My mom birthed me. She was overjoyed to have a son with the man she loved. Then I said, as a kid, I always loved watching cartoons with my dad. He was my best friend. Skip down, fast forward, 4 to 8. I started going to daycare with my cousins. In daycare, I learned how to write. Then I got a little bit older and I started going to elementary school. Fast forward, 8 to 12, I started to act out as a child, and my grades demonstrated my poor behavior. 12 to 16, along with my bad behavior, I started to follow the wrong crowd because I wanted to be liked by my peers. And then I went to high school and then I went to high school and I changed my actions effectively while making good friends in the process. 16 to 18, I just want to let y'all know I'm 18, so this is kind of, recent now. I like how we went from 0 to 4 to 16 to 18. All right, so 16 to 18, I started to find myself as a person and started working so I could give back to my mom. Also, I discovered some hidden talents of mine in high school that led me to run for president. That led me to run for the president candidate at my school. And then 20 to 24, I'll be wrapping up college, and by this time, I'll be established as a radio personality and an amateur actor. I will find my place in life. So I think
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, I think like 20, like going fast forwarding to like extra 4 years, like it helped me like think about like what I want, to be in life, but kind of overstepping my bounds by going like 8 years in the future. I think that's kind of doing too much, but a 4 years estimate, because I haven't started college yet, but like a 4 years estimate kind of, like had me like set like a goal plan of what I wanted to do and stuff.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Justice, for
you.
that. That was beautiful. Thank you. We've seen where you are and where you're going. All right. Next, Leon, did you want to share?
I can share. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, so I noticed something for the time period from 4 to 8 years. Uh, that is the only time period where I did not move from one country to another, and it's been really exciting to move so often from one country to another, but it also was a burden. It was difficult because you have to integrate yourself every time in this new environment, and it's a lot. It's a heavy burden to carry, especially because at some periods in my life, 8 to 12 years, my parents weren't very present. So I felt I was overwhelmed with the situation at the time because I moved from Italy to Germany. And I noticed, I wrote about some of my friends. So these are I noticed which are my best friends, and regarding my future, I don't know. I want to study, and I want to stay as ambitious as I am, but I don't know yet what to project my ambitions on. Yeah, so I'm a bit clueless. Clueless regarding my future, but I think I have. Yeah, that's it.
Thank
It's
you,
okay.
Leon.
Thank you, Leon. All right. Does anybody else feel comfortable with sharing their work?
Zania, do you want to share? I just unmuted you.
I can share mine. Okay. But it's kind of all like jumbled together because I crossed a lot of stuff out, so it's not clearly like separated into the ages, but it's all encompassing. Okay, so I said my mother stayed because aren't two parents better than one, but a full house can still be a broken home. My sister came, she could not speak. I was her voice. I showed others that she did know how to think. Texas was a second chance. We fled and hoped our peace would last, but it did not, and we returned. I lost my hope, my happiness. Almost my life in my own hands, I learned to look inside myself, to find a light no one else sees. I learned to love and live for me.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? We got about 10 minutes left here. Does anybody else feel comfortable in sharing?
Gloomera, do you have any students from Stacey who wants to share? Or Victor?
Hello?
I'm just going to say there are no students that would like to share.
That's okay. That's fine.
Are you guys interested in hearing some more of my poetry then?
I've seen multiple times, even in the wig.
Right, the wig.
How about Victor? Do you have what to share? Or not sure if he's still there. I think that's it, Kevin.
That's
do you
it?
have any?
That's it?
Do you have any tips for any of
Okay.
these artists?
I wanted to talk about Indigenous poetry with storytelling. So really quickly, I want to show you. I don't know if you guys could all see this on camera, but this is a painting that I had done quite some time ago. But in the painting, there's a little boy in the painting, and he's kind of tucked in underneath a bison or a buffalo. So the story that I tell to people is the story of Mistacini, which means and translates to big rock. So the story is about belonging to an area, especially when it feels like you don't feel like you belong. That's what I interpret it as. But the story is probably about 1,000 years old. And the story is in regards to an Indigenous storytelling from this territory here in Saskatchewan. So the story talks about this huge rock that existed here in this province for forever, and the Indigenous people will have their own storytelling of how it got there. Now, the storytelling that I showed you from the painting I showed you is about a little boy who gets lost with on the prairies on the prairies of Saskatchewan, and he gets lost and he joins the bison, and the bison adopt him, and when they adopt him, the little boy learns to live like a bison, basically, understanding their ways and kind of living with them. So here's another kind of sketch that I did of the little boy being adopted and lost on a prairie. So he grows up and he learns all these cultural teachings and values from the buffalo. He learns the language and he learns everything about the buffalo. And when he gets older, he becomes a wild man, kind of like in this image that I'm showing. And he returns to the people as the wild man, and kind of like a Tarzan type of story, like the Lost Boy in the Jungle type of a story. So this little boy ends up coming back to his people, and he ends up understanding, the ways of the buffalo, but he couldn't speak Nahewan, the language of Cree. He couldn't speak his Indigenous language. He only grunted and snorted, and he acted like a wild beast, like a buffalo, right? So as this was going on, he came to understand the people and the relationship, and then at the end of the story, some magic happens, and he turns into an enormous rock. Now, here in Saskatchewan, it was the biggest standing rock in our prairies, and nobody knows how it got there. Archaeologists will tell you that it was deposited there from the glacier melt, and but it was like 10 feet tall and about 10 feet wide, and it resembled a buffalo lying on a prairie on its side, looking out. And it was home to the biggest archaeological find in Saskatchewan's history, enormous, like a whole bunch of teepee rings, ceremonial sites and everything. It was just like enormous, but the government decided that they wanted to dynamite it, and they blew it up in 1966, much to the protest of the University of Saskatchewan and Indigenous people from around the province. But they disregarded the people whatsoever, and they ended up dynamiting it. And I wrote a piece for it, and I'm going to share it with you right now. It's called I'm Not a Ward of the State. Okay. And it starts right now. This poem is about a lost son on the Saskatchewan prairies. He was lost by man and adopted by bison, only to return to man to spill the blood of the bison. Mistasani, I want you to remember that. Today it is a little bit of poetry, but today I want to take this time to protest that I'm not a child. I'm not mentally ill in any kind of a way. I'm not lost, but I do sometimes feel like a prisoner in this great province of mine. They're telling me that the last of the Indian fight is gone and the West has been won with a huge explosion way back in 1966 to be exact. Miss Destiny, I want you to remember that. Misrepresentation, now that's another likely sounding word, but I hear they're using that word inside and outside of political arenas to create new taxes and policies, to convert public health care systems into privatizations, to robocalling, to omnibus pushing of laws and policies, to just plain embarrassing the democratic frack out of our systems. And you see these waiting lists get longer and longer, and the sick are not just going to stop getting sick, and the natives are not going to stop wanting to go to school. So where's all the snaps on that petro fool? And you see they're coming up with all these grand plans like, let's build bigger jails, or let's create new labor recruitment strategies. But forget about all that for a moment. Because it's this one tiny clause in the treaty, or was it the Indian Act that deems me a ward of the state because I'm Aboriginal? Ladies and gentlemen, this genocide will not be televised, and we have the Nehewak, so unusual, right? From oranges to apples, straight from Indian residential school, preferential. And unfortunately, I remember once my mushum never telling me never to speak Indian if I wanted to survive, or if I wanted to appreciate success. Success, perhaps like these political puppets who are dancing, trying to resurrect a Texan snake eye and eye for an eye mentality on this bloody Canadian constitutional menu. No. Not bloody, this starve them out style, mini-me apartheid. You see, brothers and sisters, we now need to consider the political consciousness of the Canadian Indigenous awake and doing well, and we will remain idle no more. Now let's rewind time back a little bit, because you see, I found a huge rock. Words had captured it, but eternally it bothers me that a sacred shrine of the Indian kind, petrified buffalo, Aboriginal artifacts, a symbol of stone, a symbol of unity, and between you and me, destroyed so we cannot see what exactly freedom means to me. So perhaps out in the spirit world, their ancestors are not destroying the land. They're not putting away each other on little pieces of land. They're not taking away each other's children. They're not taking away each other's tongues. They're not taking away each other's ceremonies and beliefs, and they're most certainly not dynamiting each other's cultural landmarks and calling it a Lake Diefenbaker to be exact. A man-made lake. You see, you're not going to find that in his storybooks because we carry our stories orally. Thank you. So that's a spoken word piece, and it talks to social justice and basically a historical perspective of the way that, once was a long-standing tradition, ceremony, and belief with storytelling was dynamited to make way for Western expansion and colonization of Saskatchewan and Canada as a whole. I guess I'm going to leave it with that. Does anybody have any questions before we finish today? We have about 1 minute left.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What made you want to start writing poetry?
When I was in high school. I was often kind of like on my own. Like I was dealing with a lot of different stuff during high school. So what I did was I kept journals and I made goals and I reflected on what was going on in my life. And in high school, it was like a therapy almost. Like it helped me deal with a lot of things. So as I kept writing, I kept my journals until I got to university. And I was amazed that I made it to university. And I was like, I really didn't like what I was doing, like studying. So I reflected back on my poetry and I just kind of kept on. Whenever I'd read some work that reflected Indigenous culture, and the author wasn't Indigenous, I was like, I could do so much better. I think I could do it. So it was a lot of inspiration and trying, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I still do that. Journaling is important, I think. It really is. Keeping track of your life and making goals for yourself is really important. It's one way to succeed in life, I think. Does anybody else have any questions at all?
I have a question.
Yep.
How do you find the confidence, like you were talking about performing at the open mic nights and stuff like that? How do you find confidence to read it in front of strangers, like on a stage or something like that?
When I first started, it wasn't easy. I was so afraid. So the first thing that I did was I joined up with an acting class, and I actually took acting lessons to learn how to get over the stage fright. Because when you're reading your own material, it's so hard that, sometimes you might trigger yourself and you might start crying and you might lose yourself in your own work, right? But at the same time, you got to think that your words are really powerful and relevant to people, and some people might actually need to hear what you're saying. And I often felt that, as being a lone Indigenous poet that nobody else was doing, I felt that there was a strong need for it. So as much as I was afraid, I really felt that I needed to get over that fear. So I started developing my acting skills, and I put up what they call a fourth wall, and I blocked out my audience so I could start performing my works and stuff like that. And my stages just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, look at it. I'm talking to all of you about all this stuff. I've come a long way in regards to sharing. So if you could get over that one fear of, people are kind of judging you, but really they're actually supporting you. I think that you got to understand that people love and they want to hear what you have to say. Sometimes it's really hard, but I think it's necessary. So I took acting classes. It wasn't always I could just get up on stage. It was so hard. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other last questions for Kevin?
I'm so happy to be a part of this. Now, I know this is just, right now, this is like kind of the unpacking thing. I do have other workshops that we could do if you wanted to kind of fine tune what you were writing today and bring it into a piece. So my challenge for you on this is to keep your piece within 300 words. If you keep it within 300 words, that's about the time frame that they give you for a spoken word competition is, well, for here, they give you 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So I timed it out that depending on how fast the person speaks, 300 words is going to cover it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. And this might be a good time to mention for everyone who's joining us that over the course of the summer, we're going to be doing webinars on a request basis, because we know that you guys have your own activities and whatnot, so we don't want to be planning things for you every week. But Kevin is one of the people that could come back and do a different workshop if you would like him to. So you know how to reach us. If you have any session requests for the summer, we can definitely organize them. We just want to know that you are interested and available.
Right. I'm available anytime. you guys just totally call me out, and I will show up.
Wonderful. So let's give a big thank you to Kevin for today's session. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye, everyone.